Speaking of meteor showers, right outside of Jerusalem was 185,000 Assyrian soldiers. They died in one night. Their bodies were not consumed. Okay? Think of small meteors the size of bullets going through the men. Therefore, when the king woke up, all of his army was dead. Now, the Jewish writers say that it was by fire from heaven which took away their lives and did not consume them, their bodies, nor burn their clothes. So, ancient writings even says this. See, the word angel means messenger in Hebrew.
Messenger, yeah, I've heard this before.
This planet could, because it has movement, that is not stagnant, it can be considered a messenger of God destroying their enemy. It falls within the text of that time. They didn't have a word for planet. It was luminaries, is what they called them. Now this is Haggai's warning. This is when the Hebrews came back to the land and cleared off the foundation of the debris of this destruction of the first temple. They went back to their normal lives and they built the wall of Jerusalem. They built their fancy houses, but they never built the Almighty's temple. Well, he got angry and he sent Haggai. And Haggai said that that there was a drought on the land and on the mountains, and even on the livestock and all of the laborers. And he says, I am going to shake the heavens and the earth and the seas and the dry land, and I shall shake all the nations, the entire earth. Then in this one right here, I am shaking the heavens and the earth, and I shall overturn the thrones of the kings, and I shall destroy the mighty ones of the Gentiles' reign, and overturn the chariots and their riders. Excuse me.
Wow. So much reference. So much reference. That's indicative of something really.
Yeah. What else shakes the whole earth?
Exactly.
So, there's something else I wanted to say about this. Oh, to be able to date this time when it happened. He says that they will work through the Sabbath to be able to build his house, his temple. Well, we know it's not just a Sabbath day of the week. He's talking about a Sabbath year, as well as their Jubilee. He's telling them to work through it because they were too lazy to do it when they were supposed to do it. So I said, I wonder if I could figure out what year this was. I looked for other historical reference points, and I came across Alexander the Great. Alexander the Great was taking Tyre at this same time. Remember where he built that land bridge to reach Tyre? And if you read the accounts, it said fiery hail came out of the heavens because Tyre had a wall up that he couldn't breach. Fire came from out of heaven and hit the wall, taking down the wall so Alexander the Great could take Tyre. And his men thought the gods were for him because of what they saw. I said, well, there's our meteor shower. I said, then I read where the following year he took a town in Persia. And there was an eclipse, and it named the town. So I got on my software, and I found a 2-year error on where they place this happening at. Because the software shows that it was a preambulum, just a shadowing of the moon. It didn't turn solid red. It wasn't a total eclipse. I think they only marked total eclipses in the old days.
Sure.
Okay. So I found this same 2-year era pertaining to the destruction of the Second Temple. So when I backed it up 2 years, guess what? I have a total eclipse during the time that he took that town in Persia. And it lines up with the Jubilee and the Sabbath year of the Hebrews. So now we have the lineup that this, just as it says, you shall work through your Sabbath year or Sabbaths. Because you can't build a temple on a weekend. It takes a lot longer than that.
Sure.
So he's talking about years.
Yeah.
So we can date this to 335 BCE was when it passed. Now, this is the one that people should be the most familiar with. This is Yeshua's sacrifice.
Oh, yeah.
Remember, there was 3 hours of darkness, and it says the moon and the sun was eclipsed. Well, we have a problem there. You cannot have a double eclipse in a normal state. It takes a new moon to make a solar eclipse, and a solar eclipse caused by the moon can only give you 7.3 minutes of darkness. Okay. But the text says there was 3 hours. Well, if you take a close look at this, a solar eclipse in a natural state only covers a small section of the earth with darkness. The text says the whole earth was darkened, as well as outside text that says the whole earth was darkened during this period. Rome was darkened during the same time as Jerusalem, as well as parts of Africa. All of that area of the known world was darkened. That can't happen from a lunar eclipse. Remember, it was Passover. The moon is on the opposite side of Earth. It takes a new moon to make a solar eclipse. This was a full moon. Only way you can have a double eclipse is if you have a larger object in between the sun and the earth. And this larger object will give you exactly 3 hours of darkness, as the calc shows us. The orbit of this object is coming this way. Earth is traveling this way. And the shadow lasts 3 hours, as the text says. Now you have the moon darkened and the sun darkened for 3 hours. And this is using an object 6.5 to 7 times the diameter of Earth. Again, the math works out. At this same time, just want to show you how what's called a mikrah. A mikrah in Hebrew means rehearsal. You may have heard it called feast, but that's a very poor misinterpretation. The actual word means like a dry rehearsal, a react. Okay. This mountain is Mount Moriah. This is the same peak that Abraham went to sacrifice Isaac. Remember the father sacrificing his son. Remember there was a lamb with his horns caught in the briars. Remember how Yeshua had briars? He was the lamb. He had briars on his head, just like the lamb did. And that the father was sacrificing his son here. It really happened. Now, half of this mountain was quarried later when they went to build the wall of Jerusalem. That's when this skull called right here, you can see the skull in the mountain showed up. Is after they quarried half of the mountain. Now it's called the Golgotha, the hill of the skull. This is therefore where he was sacrificed is in the exact spot where Abraham and Isaac was. Abraham and Isaac was performing a mikrah on the exact spot that X amount of 1,000 years later would become Yeshua sacrificed. On the exact spot. Remember, when Yeshua was in front of Pilate, Pilate was trying to let him go. He says, look, I'm going to bring out this prisoner, and you're going to choose which one leaves.
Yeah.
Well, this was a mikrah of a performance that the priests perform. They would take two goats, they look identical, and they would choose from this little pouch of either white stone or a black stone, which would tell them which goat to be sacrificed and which goat was to be let out of town freely, and he'd leave. Okay? The one to be sacrificed would have a red sash tied around his neck. Okay? Well, here is Yeshua and Pilate, and the other prisoner his name was Barabbas, right?
Yeah, Barabbas.
Yeah. You have to say it slower because it's two Hebrew words, not one. Bar Abba. Bar means son, and Abba means father. So Pilate knew Aramaic as well as Hebrew, and he saw the dilemma right here. He's saying, which do you wish to sacrifice? Son of the Father, which is Barabbas, or the one who calls himself Son of the Father, Yeshua? This was played out in the ceremony. Remember, Yeshua had the cloak of, was it Herod or one of them? The red cloak around his shoulders as he's marked as the sacrificial, it's the scapegoat, if you wish. That's where this word came from. It's from this ceremony here. The other, Barabbas, was let out of town free, just like the other goat was. So that's where this mikrah, I just showed you two. Let me show you the third rehearsal pattern. When he was on the cross right there, the priests were in the fields gathering 50 omers. You stretch out your hand in the field and you gather the wheat or the grain, and then you tie it right there in the middle. That's an omer. Now, they didn't harvest it. They just tied them. They tied 50. 3 days later is when they came back and they harvested. They cut it and they piled them. Well, at the time that Yeshua was on the cross, there's a great earthquake that came in and marked 50 graves were opened. 3.5 days later, when Yeshua rose, then the 50 in the graves got up and walked into town. This is the first fruit offering. This is the first of a small resurrection that he's bringing to the Father. This is the first fruit sampling, they call that. A small resurrection. He's showing this is a sample to the Father on what he's going to do as a greater event later on. Fulfilling another mikrah. So 50 graves were opened up at the time right there. Now, during the time that the earthquake opened up the graves, it opened the ground in front of him. As the centurion speared him, his blood came out, the ground opened up, and the blood didn't touch the ground. It went to an underground chamber where Solomon prepared a chamber for a future date where the ark would be moved to when Jerusalem was going to be attacked. See, they didn't have an Ark of the Covenant in this second temple. It was hidden during the destruction of the first temple. And was hidden in a cave that Solomon built. That cave is exactly underneath that spot. The blood is his blood, because the priest used to sprinkle lamb's blood on the ark. Now it's the real blood that's being sprinkled onto the ark, fulfilling the fourth mikrah. Remember the change in the calendar at Hezekiah?
Yep.
In Hebrew, there's no such word as accident. The Father changed the calendar so Hezekiah and Isaiah could create a lunar calendar then. There was no lunar calendar before that. Didn't need it. It was 30-day months. And they would start their year according to the equinox, because you needed ripe barley to make the matzah for Passover. You can't use old grain. So now they have established a lunar calendar. The reason why they needed this, is because for us to figure out during the sacrifice that the moon was not involved with the eclipse. The Father planned for the moon to be on the opposite side of Earth, purposely showing us that there's a third object there. If he would not have done that, we would never figure this out.
Amazing.
And this is not an accident.
Totally mind-blowing, Gil. Totally mind-blowing.
So, remember the centurion, the higher one of the generals or whatever? Remember how he fell to his knees and said, truly that he is the Son of God.
Gil, we're going to take a little break at that, yeah?
All right, so you have to ask the question, how do you get a hardened Roman soldier that's seen very severe battles and it can fall to his knees and say, truly he is the Son of God, unless he's seeing something that really is outstanding, that made a mark on him. And this would do it. Now, in year 312, it's been documented. Remember Constantine saw a cross in the sky?
Yeah, I've heard this before now.
Yep, at the Battle of Mienville Bridge. It was documented in October. They're not sure when he saw the sign. They say it could be either 2 or 3 months before or after. But he didn't have a cross at the time. Okay, his symbol was, let's see, this emblem right here. It's an X with a P. And that, what's interesting is Constantine wasn't converted, as people say he was.
Sure.
The coins minute after this event, you see this other entity behind his face right here?
Oh, yeah.
That's called, that's the sun god Mithra. He was a sun worshiper to the day he died. You can also see the sunbursts they have in these other. This also would happen whenever a comet is coming straight at you here at an angle. You'd see a star like a starburst as this object is coming into our inner solar system. He would see it. This fits the time, the time frame. This is called the old fiery dragon of old, you know. Now after this, around 707, is the collapse of the civilization of the Mayan and Aztecs. The majority of their population died of a severe drought. It was so severe that scientists speculate, or archaeologists speculate, about 90% of their population died. Now, what's interesting is if we take a closer look at their calendar, the outer ring of their calendar, if you take, remember this is carved in rock, doesn't that look like a comet right here?
It sure does.
If you pair these up as an entry and an exit, you have just about as many times as I've spotted in history. And the American Indians call this the blue Kachina and the red.
Oh yeah,
Kachina.
blue Kachina, I've heard this, yeah.
The blue could be the plasma having a bluish color. The red could be meteorites or meteors coming in. So, you know, even though the age, you know, different cultures call it different things. Now remember where they have a long count and a short count in the calendar that there was a lot of talk about? I found out that there's other counts that they're not telling us about, but I don't have access to these other counts. But if you take the last count, which was a Baktun, 394 years, and add it to the year that Constantine saw his object, was in 312, that gives you a year of 707. which is mid of the drought. Okay, so that meant 3.5 years earlier is when the drought started. Archaeologists date this massive drought starting around the 700s. It exactly adds up. I believe the Mayans this is an event calendar, and that they were documenting the time span between each event. And that's why you'd have multiple counts. And that's why the last count was between the time of Constantine to the time they died out. And just like the Chinese were misobsessed with the skies,
well,
so were the Mayans. And that's why they were misobsessed. They were trying to give themselves times to prepare for this object coming in.
It's a good point to make, Gil, is that the Mayans and the Chinese were obsessed. Let's make no mistake. They were fully obsessed about the skies, and there is only one thing that explains that obsession. People think we're obsessed with the skies. I mean, look at all our technology. We're not exactly obsessed with the heavens. I mean, all hands were on deck in those days for the astronomy. They were an astronomy culture. It was all hands on deck.
Well, it was documented in the Chinese documents. If a astronomer was caught sleeping at his post, they had 2 astronomers after a large feast were caught sleeping at their post, and the guards misreported it to the emperor. He had their heads cut off because he wanted accurate information. Wow. Anything that happened in the skies, he wanted it documented. And so obviously he wasn't just using it to tell his horoscope, was he? No. There was something important that he felt he needed to know. And this is the reason why the elite want to know. It's the same reason why the elite today want to know. So they can gather the food they need for their own family members or their own government.
It explains all these seed vaults. It's not just the one in Norway. There's a couple of them dotted around the place.
Yes, yes. And one thing a person has to do is connect the dots.
Yeah.
Now, after this event here is where, this is only around 960 so years ago that the Chinese, Korean, and Japanese astronomers saw it. This is well documented. You can see how they almost are in line. They saw this object for 26 months. 13 months coming in and 13 months leaving.
Wowzer.
You know. This is the picture that I took of a bronze bell. I spent 9 months in China.
Oh, wow.
Remember how our Bible calls this the fiery dragon of old? Almost a lot of cultures call this a serpent, which is our object because it has a tail.
The tail of the comet, yeah.
Tail of a comet, they would call it a serpent because they didn't have. Right. Now take a look in the center right here. What's this? What we call this centerpiece right here? Doesn't that look like a planet with lightning coming off of it? Where did we hear lightning? Remember? Zeus and so on.
Yeah, it's like a plasma discharge.
Yeah. Now look at their globe here. That's where this helps them with their astronomy. They put the same dragons on each corner.
Wow. It's incredible.
So, and whenever we plotted it, this is what we came up with during the plot. And we even, it's included some of Europe's sightings. Europe's sightings are not as accurate as the Chinese because they wouldn't give us an elevation or near a certain star. They would pretty much at this time period and would say it was seen in the morning, in the early morning, rising. Or, you know, they would say if it would be near Jupiter or one of the planets, or if it's but hardly anything else. But one of the popes died in Rome on a death, and it was seen right here. And all of this lines up during that time period. Are you familiar with the Baxter tapestry?
It's Chinese again?
No, it's a very long tapestry. Matter of fact, this area right here is talking about Harold, the king.
Wow, this is new to me. Wow.
If you look at the top left here, you see where there's that word stellar. You see an object in front and you have debris behind it, like meteor showers.
Wow.
And yeah, that was in
What year?
1050.
1054. King Harold of England. I got to check this out. This is new to me. This is what I love doing shows, Gil, to find this information. The Baxter Tapestry.
Yeah, if you look up, it's extremely long tapestry that they made. It documents a good period of history. I don't know if this stellar is pertaining to his time or the time in between him and another king. I don't know, but you can look up wherever 1054 is.
Wow.
And now we get into the Dark Ages. This object passed twice at the beginning and towards the end of the Dark Ages. Now, what's interesting about this painting right here, they claim that this is Halley's Comet. Well, maybe one of them might be. Either that or it's the object entering and leaving.
In and out. It's like it's an in and out exit entry.
But one thing, Halley's doesn't give you a meteor shower that burns buildings.
No, it doesn't. It's just a little tiny streak in the sky.
Yeah, you can see where there's a fault in the ground where it opened up. You can see where the ground here was
fractured, yeah.
Uplifted.
Utter destruction. It's actually just showing catastrophe, utter destruction.
You can see where the trees are shattered in half. You can see where they're holding their stomach because they're probably a drought, hunger. So, doesn't this sound eerily familiar, what I've just called out in the Bible?
Yep.
Fiery hail, drought, earthquakes, the world is shaking. Yeah. Then later in Germany, there's this wood carving. You see two large objects. We know this one's the sun, but you see the people on the ground are pointing at this one like, what the heck is this?
Sure.
And it's slightly larger than the sun. Well, the moon and the sun are the equal size when you put them in the sky together. That's why you have an eclipse. They're equal size. Why is this object bigger than the sun? And they're pointing at it. And it kind of shows almost like lightning coming off of it.
Mm-hmm.
I think this is what caused that had a lot to do with the Dark Ages. If you read some of the accounts of the Black Plague, some of the Black Plague is not Black Plague, period. Because the Black Plague was spread by rats, right?
Okay, allegedly.
Well, and it was the fleas on the rats, supposedly. Well, we have a problem. It was documented that the Black Plague reached, I think, Iceland. But they don't have rats there, and they don't have fleas, and the Black Plague cannot handle cold weather.
Yeah, I know what you're going to say next. It's the cometary impact of the bacteria that's coming in space.
It's remember the tail I was telling you about? The reddish. There's a dust tail also.
Yeah, the red tail.
Some people went back through that. It describes something almost similar. Remember the Hebrews, the Egyptians, when everything turned red, they had boils on their skin, and the animals had boils. Remember how the Black Plague created boils and sickness. Some people also believe that some of these meteors, depending on what they were made of, may have created a cyanide gas of some form, or ammonia, something that was very toxic to the people. Because some of these instances don't match the typical plague scenario. And matter of fact, even the account says it was like poisonous air. They even wrote it down. So do we take them as knowing what they're saying as truthful? I think we need to give them a little bit more credit, that they were living it, they were seeing it. So
sure.
The Black Plague was there, but not all of these cases are Black Plague cases, because you can't have the plague in cold regions, and and a few other things. And it spread much quicker than fleas and rats can travel. So there's a problem with that too, if you look at the speed that it's traveling at. It's modern day computers can calculate the spread of a disease pretty good, and they can't duplicate it, not at the rate that they're showing it at certain times. So there's some of this stuff is not right, you know.
Yeah. Wow, sir. Where does all the data point to, eh?
Yep. We have two independent studies on the Chinese guest stars. We have two independent studies on the orbits of comets being warped. We have 3 NASA space probes that goes to one region of space, 14 scriptural events, and 5 secular events. And all of that, there's 88 constellations in viewed from Earth. All of that points to one, Sagittarius. Not just anywhere on Sagittarius, but on the ecliptic. It has to be on Earth's planetary plane for Earth to suffer 2 meteor showers. And we definitely have a problem here. And if you look at the present signs of the weather patterns, volcanic activity, earthquake, if we average the earthquakes for this last century, on how many it was on the average per year.
Mm-hmm.
Just a few months ago, we surpassed that in one day.
Yeah, I know. I know this year has been absolutely exponentially crazy for earthquakes, and people are ignoring it too. I mean, people don't get it. They just, oh well, the earthquake's not near me. It doesn't matter. That's usually what the lackluster approach is.
Yeah. Take a look at these earthquakes. The Bible says the earthquakes would be like the pains of a woman. This was from the USGS. They stopped showing this publicly. They stopped it in 2007.
Oh my God.
But if you went back and looked at it, this is where it is roughly today. Keep in mind, they're not reporting every earthquake anymore neither. I had some friends of mine that were in Bulgaria, and they had a 3 or 4 there. The secretary of the group, she was almost thrown off the balcony. Her mom caught her belt and pulled her back. Otherwise, she was going to fall about 3 to 4 stories down to the street. And that wasn't even misreported on the USGS. And so not all of them are misreported right now. And look how high it is compared to where we used to be. You're looking at about it.
It just speaks so much, Gil. That is incredible.
We're looking at an 800% increase. But look at these numbers. Now it's over 100,000 a year. 130,000, 140,000 a year we have. And it used to be only 4,500 in 1973.
Wow.
Keep in mind that this object entered our solar system around year 2000. It was on the edge of our solar system. It takes 16 years, according to Kepler's law of the planetary motion, from the orbit of Neptune to reach our sun. Volcanic activity, I'd say it's kind of high from this chart.
Yeah.
Let me give you another scenario for El Nino and La Nino. Remember, they kind of look at this because of the temperature of the oceans, the way it changes the currents. What about 3 million recently discovered underwater volcanoes?
Mm-hmm.
If our volcanoes are this active above ground, what do you think of the volcanoes that are under the ocean? Are they seeing the same level of activity? I would say so. And if the Pacific Rim, where all of this activity is going on, wouldn't that warm up our oceans and cause El Nino? I would say so. Tornadoes are getting to where they're off the charts.
Wow, the climate stuff is incredible.
The droughts. You're going to see a major food shortage start soon when Hoover Dam goes dry. It's about to happen. This is the drought supposedly pertaining to the world. We have extreme weather pattern. You got some places that are having extreme rain and flooding, and other places that's not getting it at all.
Mm.
And we got these large sinkholes. When I was young, you never even heard of these things. This is a modern term.
It's almost like sinkholes is commonplace now. It's just like it's in our pop culture, if you will.
Yeah, exactly. Look at the record breakers we've had in 1 month. Temperature highs and lows that were broken. How about bird and fish kills?
Mm-hmm. Wow.
Now, notice that this is where a lot of populated areas are. And a community, that means you can triple this probably to get a more accurate reading. Okay, because this is only where there's internet and picture taking and modern civilizations. Bird and sea life is very sensitive to methane. So when the earth is shaking, it's releasing the methane.
Ah,
And
methane
this is
release, that's also going to heat us up a little bit.
Yep. So as the more the earth shakes, the more methane is released, and the more death is occurring between the bird and the. You've heard of canary in a coal mine, right?
Oh yeah, that's how they know if the miners are going to get it.
Exactly. Just because it just takes a small parts per million, and methane is odorless, and that bird's dead. Same thing with these fish. And a caribou. Look at the llamas at the bottom left here. 171,000.
Oh my God.
Alpaca were dead in Peru. 171,000. 200 dead reindeer here. 127,000 antelopes in Kazakhstan. 150 dolphins at the bottom here.
Wow.
Major deaths going on. Here's our magnetic north. It's moving 12 times its normal speed. Here's a chart that shows how quickly it's moving. Remember, certain airports are changing their numbers on their landing strip because their north reading is changing. At least in the U.S. it has.
Yeah, they're actually changing the runways. They have to. They have no choice. It's changed that much that they actually have to change the runways for the pilots.
Yep. I plotted. There's information that you can get that plots where the magnetic north has been throughout the centuries. And what I did was a plot where I have data that showed that this object passed through the system here. Then I did an average circle between all three of them. Then I took where we are today. Well, in 2015, we entered into this average circle. 2016, we're getting even deeper in there. But we're in the average of circle on where it passed in the past. In past history, this is, this we could use this as an indicator. It's close. And this brings us to the book of Revelation. And it was written on the island of Patmos. And I just wanted to show your audience that Seal 6 scientifically matches this event right here. Seal 7 matches this event. Remember how it mentions a large meteor, this wormwood, the size of a mountain, hits Earth? Remember that large one that hit Earth that made the Gulf of Mexico? Where was it? It was on the second event. It's mentioned in Seal 7 that there's a large meteor the size of a mountain that's going to hit Earth right here. It's so, it hits Earth so large, Earth wobbles like a drunkard, like a hut in the wind. If you read, you see Isaiah right here, okay? So the earth is broken up, the earth is split asunder, the earth is violently shaken, the earth reels like a drunkard, it sways like a hut in the wind. That's a pretty descriptive.
Very descriptive, yeah.
Compared to what we know. Remember, he says in the end days, It'd be like the time of Noah. Now we know to what extreme is he talking about. It's the scientific event he's talking about. Remember how it says the skies will roll away like a scroll? Right here in Revelation 14:15. Well, a meteor, when it makes an impact, will make a mushroom cloud just like a nuclear blast, if it's large enough, and it will, and the thermal climb as it's rising will cause the clouds to roll away just like a scroll. And that's what you're going to see when this fiery mountain hits the earth.
Mm-hmm.
When this big one hits, it's going to make a mushroom cloud like that. Small ones don't, but big ones do. And the earth is going to pass through the tail of this comet again. It's going to cause us to have a 12-hour delay on our rotation. And this is something that people need to get a grip of, because astronomers are going to predict the wrong half of the earth, because it's a physicist model that says the tail is plasma, not the astronomy model. In other words, like if we were to try to calculate everything I showed you 15 years ago using the astronomy model, I couldn't make it work. It's only because of the physicist model I can make this work.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And you need to, Earth, the average person who is not aware of this is only going to get a 40-day warning. This is when the government's going to tell you.
Well, 40 days is not much preparation, is it?
No, not when everybody's going to the store at the same time. If you ever been in a hurricane before, shelves are cleared out within 3 days.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, it's they even talk about our electrical grid. If our electrical grid ever goes down, people are just going to flee and go to the stores, and they're not going to have any air conditioning. It's going to be a pandemic. Literally, it's going to be a pandemic within like days. Food supplies are like, everybody's hanging on them. Everybody is so dependent on food supplies in the store. How many people, what percentage of the population today, Gil, grows their own food? It's nearly,
correct.
It's nearly non-existent.
Very few.
Very few. Very few people grow, and a lot of people eat. So.
And then the people who are strong, like the military, are going to go and take your food if you have any extra. The strong always picked on the weak. So that's kind of basically what's going on. Now, remember what I was saying, how we're going to go through the tail of the plasma?
Sure.
That means all generators worldwide have to shut down 3 days before its arrival. 3 days, the entire globe is in darkness.
Mm-hmm.
And there's not enough batteries in the world for people to use flashlights. Not enough batteries in the world. You got to go back to burn oil lamps again.
Wow.
Remember the statement of Luke in Luke 21 says, men's heart failed them for fear and for looking after those things which are coming on the earth. For the powers of heaven shall be shaken. I'd say so.
Oh, yeah. Wowzer.
I don't know if you want to make this for another point in another lecture, or if you want me to keep on, I can finish this. That's up to you.
What do you think, Gil? I mean, we're already over. We're already. Well, how much more we got? I mean, I don't mind. It's up to you, brother. I mean, we're over the second hour that we planned anyway. We're definitely into the third hour now. But
well, then let's finish it then.
Let's finish it then. Let's go.
What gives me great concern is, as I showed you throughout the past, how accurate God was on what he was saying and what he was doing and what he was using. Okay? When we read Revelation 12:1, it stands out to me because I read it with astronomy eyes. It says, and there appeared a great wonder in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun, and a moon under her feet, and upon her head a crown of 12 stars. Again, remember the time of Joseph. It's mentioning stars here. You can't see stars if the sun's out. So what would have been that word? It's illuminated body. It is the interpreter, because moon and stars are mentioned. He said, well, the only other object is the sun. And he's placing sun there. But I can point out to you that this is going to be, the illuminated body is our planet that it's talking about. Remember, during Joseph's time, the constellation with 11 stars is Leo, which I have right here. Leo is 11 stars. The 12th star is Jupiter. This is the crown over Virgo's head. The woman with the foot, with the moon at her foot, is Virgo. Now, what's interesting is that, how did they pick this date 2,000 years ago? This was written on the island of Patmos roughly 2,000 years ago. I'm going to show you how, even if I was to give them the software that we have today and say, pick me this date, that they still couldn't do it. You see, a constellation right here shifts over every 2,100 years. During Passover, 2,000 years ago, this same time period, it would have been Libra right here, the scales of judgment. Okay. Now it's Virgo. Jupiter has an orbit of 11.7 years. The moon has an orbit of 29.5 days. But the tilt of the orbit is every 18 years for the tilt to get it to where it's under the foot of Virgo. Keep in mind that you have to have 3 to 4 decimal places to get it accurate, not just to the day, but to the hour we're talking about. Because this is at midnight from the viewpoint of Jerusalem after a 12-hour delay in Earth's rotation. Wow. And keep in mind that there's a wild card. This planet has an unstable orbit. How could they have guessed it 5 passes later, the exact hour that it was going to come around, and for its tail to illuminate only Virgo, as the text says? Only Virgo is illuminated. The sun illuminates all of these constellations. The text says Virgo is the only one illuminated. It's impossible for a human being 2,000 years to give us this date. This can only be done by a divine entity that placed the text in there, or the knowledge in there. It can't happen from human hands. Remember, they didn't have the 0 yet. They didn't have decimal places yet. But yet they needed a decimal place of at least 3 to 4 to make the calculation correct. And they didn't have the planetary science yet to do this.
Sure.
And even if I handed them a software, they can't do it. This is what the software shows right here. If you look over here at the, pick a position 180 degrees opposite of Jerusalem, that would put it in the middle of the Pacific, to compensate for a 12-hour rotational delay of Earth's rotation from the latitude of Jerusalem. What would they see at midnight? Remember, Yeshua comes midnight. This is what you see. You see the tail of this object illuminating only Virgo, with the moon at the foot of Virgo, with a crown of 12 stars. This date greatly concerns me. That's March 26th, either 25th or 26th of 2016. It's, I don't have a crystal ball. I can't say that this is the exact date, but I'm going to say that this date greatly concerns me because it matches prior entry and exits of what's been established throughout the Bible.
Wow. Just for posterity, Gil, where does the wormwood name come from? Is that biblical as well? Or, I mean, we give it the modern name Planet X now and Planet 7X, but how old is the wormwood name? Where does that come from?
Wormwood is an asteroid that follows behind. That's part of the debris field. That hits us at the second event. The planet itself is called the fiery dragon of old.
Okay,
in
I
the
got you.
in the Bible. It's two separate items.
Got you.
Two separate. Remember that picture I showed you of wormwood in a museum? It's a meteor. It's an
Yeah,
asteroid,
it's an
we'll
actual.
call it.
I got you. I got you.
And it says that it's going to be the size of a mountain, but that hits us at the second event. The planet is nowhere around. It's going back into deep space. We're just traveling 5 months later, and we're running into the second debris field. So this is the pivot point I was telling you about. When Earth tilts another 26 to 28 degrees, somewhere around the Middle East right here is going to be the pivot point for the tilt. If you're 90 degrees from that tilt, this is the danger zone. All of South America, East Coast, Australia, Philippines, not a good place to be. And if you look at this right here, if we tilt 26 to 28 degrees, then the Arctic Circle will come down to about Washington, D.C. All right?
Sure.
Well, if we look at nuclear facilities that are not designed for that type of weather, will their cooling facilities freeze? Yes, probably so. The cooling on these nuclear power plants will probably freeze. And if it doesn't freeze, can they take a meteor shower? No. They cannot take a direct hit from a meteor. So I would definitely not want to live in this area right here, in southern Canada and in eastern and mid area of the U.S. Here, now, just to prove that we've tilted before in the past.
His name is Dima. I think this little guy's name is Dima. Dima the elephant. This little guy. He has a nickname, Dima.
Dima?
I think that's his nickname, yeah. They call him Dima. It's a Russian name. This is the little elephant from Siberia, Moscow.
Well, yeah, this is a woolly mammoth. Entire herds were frozen. And what's interesting is that they were frozen so quick, they didn't have time to swallow the food that they were munching on.
This is something scientists have never explained, and they just wash it they wash it away, or they put it under the carpet like it doesn't exist, this piece of information.
Well, remember where Siberia is. If Siberia was at the top of Earth when it was tilting, then the Arctic winds went right over them at 150 mile an hour winds or more, super cold winds. They froze instantly. They were flash frozen, they call that. And that's why they didn't have time to swallow. Remember, the Bible says 1/3 of the grass, 1/3 of the trees, and 1/3 of the rivers are destroyed or burned up. They didn't have a word for continental crust, but they're describing continental crust. So what half of the globe is 1/3 of the continental crust? Because only half of it goes through the debris field. The back half is shielded. Well, the Bible clearly described North and South America. North and South America is 1/3. Europe, Asia, and Africa is 2/3 of the continental crust. Scientists will predict Europe, Asia, and Africa to be the side that's going to be hit by the meteor shower. But they don't have a model that shows a 12-hour delay in rotation. There's only a biblical model. Therefore, the target zone is 1/3. Now, how can people 2,000 years ago accurately predict that?
Wow.
This is meteors that have hit the world here, that they have documented. If you add up all of this, this is over close to 35,000 meteor craters that have been documented. Now, what's interesting about that, they make no comment about the ones that didn't find. If you notice where the populated areas are, Europe and America, Australia, India, how dense the meteor impacts are? Do you think the meteors have a homing device that say, I'm only going to hit where it's populated areas? No.
Wow.
So if you were to cover the globe at this density of impacts, because these other areas, probably anybody's living, okay, or has enough knowledge to pick out a meteor crater. And then look at the oceans. The oceans don't leave a crater. So there's 3 times more ocean area than there surface area of ocean than there is land. So if you covered all those areas at this density, does that tell you that we go through a debris field? That these are not single random events? That these are meteor showers or storms that are actually hitting the Earth? The U.S. is going to be hit by a...
This is my major worry. You brought it up for my next question. Nuclear power has got to be so worrying. Look at Fukushima. It's a great example. Chernobyl. I mean, 2 nuclear disasters, but any sort of a cataclysm that rocks this Earth, whether this is going to be Planet X or anything else, the nuclear power stations are going to fail. They're going to crack open. It's going to be mayhem. That's why I don't like nuclear. It's the main reason I don't like nuclear.
Nuclear power should have never been built. There's other safer means of nuclear processes without plutonium or without these toxic waste. There's safe forms of nuclear that you can't make bombs out of. The only reason why you have nuclear power plants is because you want to make bombs. Okay, the way that they're doing it today. So any country that has a nuclear power plant using plutonium and all that, guess what? They're making bombs, whether or not they're public or not. That's what they're using them for. I've seen the computer model. If La Palma Island goes, this is an island off the Canary Islands off of North Africa and south of Spain. There's this island that has a huge split. It's a volcanic island, and all it takes is an earthquake to shake it, and half that island is going to cascade into the Atlantic. The computer models show 9 tidal waves hitting the East Coast, Cuba, parts of South America. The first tidal wave is 90 foot tall, followed by progressively smaller ones, 9 more after that. Now, if Fukushima was destroyed by only a 30-foot tidal wave, we have 21 nuclear facilities along the East Coast that once the first tidal wave in, the other 9 is pushing that water deeper and deeper in. They estimate it could go at least 100 miles inland.
Wow.
They, according to the computer models that I saw, this is not YouTube videos, this is computer models that I've seen, that we'll have a 30-foot surge in the Gulf of Mexico throughout the Central America and where I live as well. I live about right here. I'm inside the crater rim.
Wow.
And we'll show you, if you add Yellowstone, we have 3 super volcanoes here, not just one. Everybody talks about Yellowstone, but we have 3. The Long Valley caldera, and I think Crater Lake is the 3rd one. I'm not sure about that. But Yellowstone is the biggest in the world. You see these lines? These are the ash-covered areas that this thing's going to cover, somewhere around these areas. This is what it covered in its past. Then if you put a 100-mile circle or so, 75-mile circle around every nuclear power plant, if we have a meteor shower that hits this side of the Earth, it's not going to look pretty. The Bible says no one will live here for 1,000 years. I would say so. This is the area. This is one of the areas that it's talking about in the Bible, that no one would live here for 1,000 years. It's going to be set as an example. When you ignore the Word of God as severely as the United States and Canada has done, there's a reckoning to be happened. This is something that Amos said right here. And it shall be that day declared the Master Yahweh, that I shall cause the sun to go down at noon, and shall darken the earth on a day of its brightness. Remember I was telling you that Earth's rotation was slowed down by 12 hours?
Wow.
And it shall darken the earth on a day of its brightness. And it shall cause the sun to go down at noon, instead 6 hours off, because the Earth's rotation is turning, and the sun will go down at noon. Jerusalem will be the safe side. It'll be on this side. This side of the half of the earth is going to be hit by a meteor shower. And this pretty much, a lot of people don't realize it because they don't study the details close enough.
Sure.
There's two taking aways in the Bible, not just one. And the book of Revelation has a blessing and a curse with it. He says, if you read it and understand it, you're blessed. If you change it, you're cursed. If you take away a word or add a word. Now, keep in mind, we're reading from a translated copy. I'm pointing out possible translational errors, and I give you both meanings. It could mean sun, or it can mean our planet. I'll let you choose. But sun is not correct. Now, I'm going to show you where some pastors have changed a few words and where they're cursed. One of the taking aways, which is this first one right here where I'm pointing at, this taking away is different from this taking away over here, where the dead are first and the living are taken up and they go to heaven. Okay? This is called the day that no man knows the day or the hour, because our time is screwed up when we're living in it. We can count it on a calendar today, but we won't know it when we're living it. Because remember the first event right here? We lost 12 hours in its rotation. Now noon is midnight, midnight is noon. What do you call that next day? And when does it start?
Mm-hmm.
When we hit 5 months later by the second event, by the fiery mountain, we're hit so hard where Earth is moved inward slightly, and our day becomes 364-day year, Enoch's calendar. So he says we won't know the day or the hour. He didn't say we won't know the week or the month, but we won't. When we're living in it, we won't know this day. Even though in Hebrew we know it's the beginning of the 7th month, because that's called as a Hebrewism. This is the day that no man knows the day or the hour. But in this particular incident, when we're living in it, we won't be able to define that day. Even Yeshua doesn't know that. He says only the Father knows. Okay. This date right here is qualified different. This is also a taking away. He says a remnant is taken to the wilderness, and they have to meet the groom on Mount Zion in Jerusalem. So this one is totally defined different, this taking away, than this one over here. And people tend to blend them together. And some pastors have said remnant means the entire body of the church. No, it doesn't. Not in Hebrew, not in any language. Wilderness, they say, means heaven. No, it doesn't. Not in Hebrew, nor does it mean that in any other language. That's what you call changing words to mean something that it's not. It cannot even be translated into any language to mean that. Those people that believe that or cursed. They're saying right here for this meteor shower, don't worry, you're going to be raptured to heaven. And that's not what it says. The people who believe that are cursed because they changed the meaning of what it actually said. You have to have a point. Remember I taught you what a mikra is? There's a rehearsal.
The mikra, yeah.
This rehearsal requires you to be in Jerusalem at Mount Zion. Matter of fact, you can read Joel, Joel, 2nd chapter, verse 30 to 32. It defines everything there for you. 30 and 31 says it's the end of days and that there's a double eclipse. Double eclipse means our planet is there. Okay? The last line, verse 32, says, for there will be an escape in Jerusalem on Mount Zion for a remnant brought to a place of safety. He's telling you this remnant has to meet him in Jerusalem on Mount Zion on that appointed day and time. It's a mikra. The bride has to be home. The groom is picking up the bride. Her home is the old Jerusalem. Her new home is the new Jerusalem. But in a Hebrew wedding, before she can go to her new home, she's brought to a, what's it called? A bridal chamber where she prepares herself before the wedding. The wilderness is the bridal chamber where she prepares herself before she goes to the wedding. And she prepares herself for 3.5 years before she enters heaven. The dead are first and then the living. And people are missing this in the scriptures here. That's why the parable of the 10 virgins is so important to grasp. This is another point that was impossible for them to pick. 2000. Remember I told you this is March 25th or 26th, where this symbol in the sky happens.
Sure.
That's exactly 3.5 days earlier than that is the Feast of Passover on a full moon. Why is that important? Remember where the two prophets, they prophesied 1,260 days, then they're dead 3.5? The root word to prophesy means to profess, to speak. They can't speak if they're dead for 3.5. So how many days are there on earth? 3.5 days longer. They're 1,263.5 days. Well, that shows us that they're ahead of the bride and the bridemaid going into the wilderness, because they're only in the wilderness only 1,260 days. That means Elijah comes on the Feast of Passover, right here, on a full moon. We get to be with the two witnesses for 3.5 days before the Messiah comes. The job of Elijah is to announce the groom is coming, mid of week, mid of night. See, the bridesmaids, you can tell the difference between a bride and a bridesmaid. The bridesmaids carry lamps because it's a night procession for a Hebrew wedding. He comes mid of night to pick up his bride. The bridesmaids carry the lamps lighting the procession at night. There's 5 foolish and 5 wise. They're literal oil lamps. What makes those wise wise and the foolish foolish? The foolish only have oil in their lamp. The wise have an extra portion of oil besides the oil in their lamps. The oil in the lamp is supposed to burn for 12 hours. After the first 12 hours of burning, the foolish are out of oil. The wise are trimming their wicks and refilling their oil. The foolish asked the wise for oil. They said, no, we don't have enough. Go back to town and get you some. And then as they're trimming and lighting, a shout goes out saying the groom is here. Only the wise go out to meet the groom. Remember, they have 2 portions of oil. Each portion is 12 hours. Remember what I said? The night is going to be 12 hours longer on the Jerusalem side. On the U.S. side, it'd be 12 extra hours of daylight because there's a 12-hour delay in rotation. The wise understand this, and they get 2 portions of oil. This is literal oil. Remember I said there's not enough batteries in the world for everybody to have batteries. This is olive oil. And they make it to the place of safety where they're protected for 3.5 years during this time of the Great Tribulation. He says, if you make it to the end, without being in this place of protection, it says count yourself lucky. Very few of you will make it to the end unless you're in this place of protection. Now we can date a few things possibly. If this March 26th is the actual date, and remember, we have to see it before we can verify it, and there's no valid pictures of our planet yet. 40 days earlier is Jonah's warning. That's February 15th, 2016.
Sure.
We can go from this date into the 1,260 days. This is the day of resurrection and rapture. We can count backwards from this date, which Daniel says, if you make it to the end, 1,335 days. From where? From when you see the Antichrist make the peace agreement. Well, that gives you January 11th. Then he will break it at 1,290 days, Daniel says. All right? That's broken right here, July 24th, 2019. That gives you a 45-day of war before the day of resurrection and rapture. A remnant is pushed to the Negev desert. 3/4 of Israel is conquered. There's a group that's pushed to a small group that's pushed to the Negev desert. The Muslims are about ready to wipe them out. This is when the 2 prophets die. That's when the Muslims stop and celebrate. They're giving gifts to each other because the 2 prophets are dead now. That's what saves the remnant in the desert. It's because the 2 prophets are dead. Then he resurrects them before Muslims are wiping them out.
Wow.
And then this is the overall chart right here of the timeline.
Wowza.
Y'all able to download all of these charts for free.
Tell us where we can get that at. This is the important part, Gil, because there's a lot of background information here, and I know you've provided a wealth of different content. Give us the website as well as the YouTube channel where people can either download the charts, and also there's a free ebook, I believe.
Yes, my website is not up to date, really. It's a gentleman from England that started it, but I never had enough time to go in there and work on it. So most of my work is on YouTube. And if you look underneath the videos, there's a Dropbox link. And that brings you to all of my reference material, the free ebook with all of the charts in it, and everything you really need. And it's all given to y'all free.
Sure.
To where y'all can do your own research.
Indeed. And I'm going to link that up as well. I'm going to just probably copy and paste the YouTube description you have as well so that people can grab the Dropbox links there too. But yeah, planet7x.com and Planet7x on YouTube as well. Gil, I really, really thank you for your time today. I know that was a lot of information to get through, and you're a warrior. You definitely have plowed through a lot of information there. I like your methodology, and I like you're quite tenacious, and you've kept to the logical, detailed facts as best you can, and applying the science and the data that we know of as today. Very indicative with the astronomy, the geological data, the historical accounts, the references, biblical and otherwise. It seems to all gel. I mean, the climatic data, it's mind-blowing. It really is, Gil. But
we definitely have a problem. It's a real object. It's just when is it going to return? Keep your eyes out and look for it. If it's going to be this year, this Jubilee, which is this next year, then that means we will see it this December.
Sure. Well, I'm going to leave it at that, Gil, unless you've got any final comments. I really thank you for your time. It's been a pleasure talking to you.
Well, let me just leave on this note. There's a gentleman in California that made a documentary on my findings, and his DVD will probably be out in 1 more week. So if people want to see the documentary that goes through these findings and get a DVD, this gentleman is going to have one for sale.
Sure.
He's going to put up. So, and that's it.
Okay, bro. Well, listen, again, that was a long show for me. That's got to be my longest show to date, but I enjoyed every minute of it, and I enjoy your company, Gil. We're going to talk to you in the not-too-distant future, I hope. For now, we're going to go and get a tea break, a well-earned tea break. But Gil, I thank you again, brother, and we'll speak to you in a not-too-distant future.
All right. Sounds good. Bye-bye. Speaking of meteor showers, right outside of Jerusalem was 185,000 Assyrian soldiers. They died in one night. Their bodies were not consumed. Okay? Think of small meteors the size of bullets going through the men. Therefore, when the king woke up, all of his army was dead. Now, the Jewish writers say that it was by fire from heaven which took away their lives and did not consume them, their bodies, nor burn their clothes. So, ancient writings even says this. See, the word angel means messenger in Hebrew.
Messenger, yeah, I've heard this before.
This planet could, because it has movement, that is not stagnant, it can be considered a messenger of God destroying their enemy. It falls within the text of that time. They didn't have a word for planet. It was luminaries, is what they called them. Now this is Haggai's warning. This is when the Hebrews came back to the land and cleared off the foundation of the debris of this destruction of the first temple. They went back to their normal lives and they built the wall of Jerusalem. They built their fancy houses, but they never built the Almighty's temple. Well, he got angry and he sent Haggai. And Haggai said that that there was a drought on the land and on the mountains, and even on the livestock and all of the laborers. And he says, I am going to shake the heavens and the earth and the seas and the dry land, and I shall shake all the nations, the entire earth. Then in this one right here, I am shaking the heavens and the earth, and I shall overturn the thrones of the kings, and I shall destroy the mighty ones of the Gentiles' reign, and overturn the chariots and their riders. Excuse me.
Wow. So much reference. So much reference. That's indicative of something really.
Yeah. What else shakes the whole earth?
Exactly.
So, there's something else I wanted to say about this. Oh, to be able to date this time when it happened. He says that they will work through the Sabbath to be able to build his house, his temple. Well, we know it's not just a Sabbath day of the week. He's talking about a Sabbath year, as well as their Jubilee. He's telling them to work through it because they were too lazy to do it when they were supposed to do it. So I said, I wonder if I could figure out what year this was. I looked for other historical reference points, and I came across Alexander the Great. Alexander the Great was taking Tyre at this same time. Remember where he built that land bridge to reach Tyre? And if you read the accounts, it said fiery hail came out of the heavens because Tyre had a wall up that he couldn't breach. Fire came from out of heaven and hit the wall, taking down the wall so Alexander the Great could take Tyre. And his men thought the gods were for him because of what they saw. I said, well, there's our meteor shower. I said, Then I read where the following year he took a town in Persia, and there was an eclipse, and it named the town. So I got on my software, and I found a 2-year error on where they place this happening at, because the software shows that it was a preemblem, just a shadowing of the moon. It didn't turn solid red. It wasn't a total eclipse. I think they only marked total eclipses in the old days.
Sure.
Okay. So I found this same 2-year error pertaining to the destruction of the Second Temple. So when I backed it up 2 years, guess what? I have a total eclipse during the time that he took that town in Persia. And it lines up with the Jubilee and the Sabbath year of the Hebrews. So now we have the lineup that this, just as it says, you shall work through your Sabbath year, or Sabbaths. Because you can't build a temple on a weekend. It takes a lot longer than that.
Sure.
So he's talking about years.
Yeah.
So we can date this to 335 BCE was when it passed. Now this is the one that people should be the most familiar with. This is Yeshua's sacrifice.
Oh yeah.
Remember, there was 3 hours of darkness, and it says the moon and the sun was eclipsed. Well, we have a problem there. You cannot have a double eclipse in a normal state. It takes a new moon to make a solar eclipse, and a solar eclipse caused by the moon can only give you 7.3 minutes of darkness. Okay. But the text says there was 3 hours. Well, if you take a close look at this, a solar eclipse in a natural state only covers a small section of the earth with darkness. The text says the whole earth was darkened, as well as outside text that says the whole earth was darkened during this period. Rome was darkened during the same time as Jerusalem, as well as parts of Africa. All of that area of the known world was darkened. That can't happen from a lunar eclipse. Remember, it was Passover. The moon is on the opposite side of Earth. It takes a new moon to make a solar eclipse. This was a full moon. Only way you can have a double eclipse is if you have a larger object in between the sun and the earth. And this larger object will give you exactly 3 hours of darkness, as the calc shows us. The orbit of this object is coming this way. Earth is traveling this way. And the shadow lasts 3 hours, as the text says. Now you have the moon darkened and the sun darkened for 3 hours. And this is using an object 6.5 to 7 times the diameter of Earth. Again, the math works out. At this same time, just want to show you how what's called a mikrah. A mikrah in Hebrew means rehearsal. You may have heard it called feast, but that's a very poor misinterpretation. The actual word means like a dry rehearsal, a react. Okay. This mountain is Mount Moriah. This is the same peak that Abraham went to sacrifice Isaac. Remember the father sacrificing his son. Remember there was a lamb with his horns caught in the briars. Remember how Yeshua had briars? He was the lamb. He had briars on his head, just like the lamb did. And that the father was sacrificing his son here. It really happened. Now, half of this mountain was quarried later when they went to build the wall of Jerusalem. That's when this skull, called right here, you can see the skull in the mountain, showed up. Is after they quarried half of the mountain. Now it's called the Golgotha, the hill of the skull. This is therefore where he was sacrificed is in the exact spot where Abraham and Isaac was. Abraham and Isaac was performing a Mekrah on the exact spot that X amount of 1,000 years later would become Yeshua sacrificed. On the exact spot. Remember when Yeshua was in front of Pilate? Pilate was trying to let him go. He says, look, I'm going to bring out this prisoner, and you're going to choose which one leaves. Yeah. Well, this was a Mekrah of a performance that the priests performed. They would take two goats, they look identical, and they would choose from this little pouch of either white stone or a black stone, which would tell them which goat to be sacrificed and which goat was to be let out of town freely, and he'd leave. Okay? The one to be sacrificed would have a red sash tied around his neck. Okay? Well, here is Yeshua and Pilate, and the other prisoner his name was Barabbas, right?
Yeah, Barabbas.
Yeah. You have to say it slower because it's two Hebrew words, not one. Bar Abba. Bar means son, and Abba means father.